Yesterday, the Intel Committee's the chairman had a pretty big press conference and had some pretty revealing information about the state of the Russian investigation. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it's still clearly all still going on. We might be thinking about other things temporarily, hurricanes, Vegas, but don't forget this is all happening in the background. After conducting more than 100 interviews in their investigation, the bipartisan leaders of the Senate Intelligence Committee say it's still an open question whether anyone in the Trump campaign cooperated with Russia to influence the 2016 election. Senators Burr and Warner provided an update on their probe into Russian interference yesterday and issued a warning about the upcoming elections.
The Russian intelligence service is determined, clever, and I recommend that every campaign and every election official take this very seriously as we move into this November's election and as we move into preparation for the 2018 election.
The Russian active measures efforts did not end on Election Day, and we need to be on guard. One of the things that is particularly troubling to both of us is the fact that it's become evident that 21 states' electoral systems were not all penetrated, but there was at least trying to open the door.
Well, they haven't reached a conclusion. The senators also addressed the dossier compiled by a former British spy, which alleged financial and personal ties between President Trump's campaign and associates. Chairman Burr suggested that parts of the dossier were corroborated, but then they, quote, hit a wall.
Though we have been incredibly enlightened at our ability to rebuild backwards the Steele dossier up to a certain date, getting past that point has been somewhat impossible. And I say this because I don't think we're going to find any intelligence products that unlock that key to pre-June of 16.
And now Reuters reports that Special Counsel Bob Mueller has taken over investigations of the dossier, according to 3 different sources with knowledge of that probe. Meanwhile, we're also learning more about Russia's use of Facebook to interfere in the election. It turns out about a quarter of the 3,400 ads linked to Russia targeted specific states, including traditionally Democratic strongholds like Wisconsin and Michigan that ended up, of course, flipping for Donald Trump, as well as the battleground states of Florida and Ohio. The Russians also targeted states with high-profile incidents of violence between police and African Americans, states like Missouri, Maryland, New York, and Ohio. Ads were also planted in solidly red states like Texas, Alabama, and Mississippi. Last month, Facebook revealed that groups linked to Russia spent $100,000 on election ads. Both Facebook and Twitter have agreed to testify now before the Senate Intelligence Committee investigating Moscow's election interference. You know, just looking at the states that they chose, either somebody in the Russian side or they had links with somebody here was giving them a pretty good take on how to use their money.
A pretty good take on how to use their money, and also if you look at the content of the advertisements, at least some of them that you've seen out there already, it's also somebody that's pretty darn aware of how to target, what bells to ring. It certainly looks like they had the help of Americans who might know how to campaign and how to win elections. I'm wondering, Mike, if you heard Mark Warner, what the ranking member of the Intel Committee said yesterday. That is that he wanted to see all the Facebook ads that the Russians ran or people linked to Russian groups ran. And he said we have a right to see that as Americans, to see how the Russians tried to influence our elections. Now, this is something we don't need to get from the Trump White House. This is something we don't need to get from Mueller's office. This is something that Facebook can put out there. And if Mark Zuckerberg is really on this PR campaign and taking out full-page advertisements in the New York Times, you know, he can probably help in his PR push and get some goodwill by just being transparent, throwing it all on the table and say, these are all the ads that Russia or Russian-backed groups took out on Facebook during the 2016 election, trying to sway American democracy.
Yeah, well, Joe, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook have been dragged kicking and screaming to the edge of transparency over about 2 or 3 months. I mean, at first they were living in denial, and public denial, that, you know, we had nothing to do with this. We didn't know this was going on. We're not sure this was going on. But now the reality has dawned on them. There's another reality that occurred yesterday, I think, for a lot of people, all the boys and girls out there watching. You saw Dick Burr, a Republican, and you saw Mark Warner, a Democrat, standing shoulder to shoulder, talking about an issue that affects the entire nation, our country. And Carol Lee, I don't know about you, but it was encouraging to finally see some sense of bipartisanship in this polarized town where you live.
It was, and they genuinely seemed to agree and be working very cooperatively together, which is a stark contrast to the House intelligence investigation, which seems to not even be in the game. The thing that struck me was that when they were talking about protecting the need to protect the electoral system, it was not just the midterms, but they talked about how vulnerable our presidential elections are because of our electoral college system, that all you would have to do is take 2 or 3 states and figure out how to pick them off and create chaos there, and you can really alter in the same way you could alter, you know, a House race by picking a couple of jurisdiction counties or something like that. And so it's not just 2018, it's 2020, and they also highlighted that there's so much work to do before these elections, which seem pretty much around the corner.
You know, because of the Electoral College, Richard, Carol is right. You can not only target specific states to swing an entire presidential election, you can find out very easily what counties to target, what subsections of those counties to target. Without breaking a sweat, you can get all the information online. That causes a real problem. But I was surprised yesterday that Richard Burr did not deny that they were still investigating claims of collusion, and also they were not dismissing the information inside that infamous dossier.
True. I had 2 takeaways. One is with the Russians. Cyber now is right up there with military power and energy as their principal tools of expanding Russian influence. This is now their arsenal, their toolkit. On collusion, though, Joe, I also had a slightly different view, which is how hard it's going to be to prove. Yes, you can't rule it out, but to rule it in is going to take a degree of specificity that I think could be very difficult. Maybe, maybe Mueller can do it, but I think what we saw yesterday with Congress is they've run up against their limits. They can't rule it out, but they can't rule it in. And I think the question is whether Mueller it can bring more to bear to the investigation than they can.
We shall see. Obviously, he has a lot more power to do that than they do. And coming up next, are Rex Tillerson's days in the Trump administration numbered? We're going to be asking former U.S. Ambassador and State Department official Nicholas Burns what he thinks. And later, NBC's Andrew Mitchell will once again join the conversation. Morning Joe, coming right back. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.